Hello and welcome to the Colts Cover-2 podcast. I am Joel A. Erickson. I am joined, as always, by Nate Atkins. If you are watching this on YouTube or the video piece of it, you can see that Nate has figured out how to share his screen so that we can do a live mock draft for you. Well, not live, a taped mock draft for you.
Live for us.
That will then become the draft we put online tomorrow, right? That's the plan.
Yep. That's the year. Last mock draft we'll ever do for 2025.
In some cases, for some of us, it's our first mock draft we've done for 2025.
That's right.
Nate usually does these for us. Nate's a little bit more of a prospect head than I am at this point in our respective careers.
That's true. Not as much as I used to be, but I still try.
I think the natural progression of beat writer is that when you get into it, you're super into the draft prospects and like the whole like 250 like draftable people or whatever. And as you get older, I think you get away from that for reasons I don't necessarily want to explain. But
that is true.
But
I think I'll always keep a little bit of an interest just because that's how my career started, and also I'm a big enough college football fan that I just kind of know some of these players and watch them. But yeah, it changes from when you're your first couple of years doing it.
I would say without getting too into the weeds, the thing that happens to me is that between traveling and my kids' sports and everything like that, the games I see in the fall nowadays are the teams I like, the teams that I watch: Missouri, Wisconsin, and then my wife is an Auburn fan, so those are the three teams I watch a lot.
So those are the three schools that we draft from in this mock draft.
Whereas I don't know if Auburn and Wisconsin are the right places to be going right now. Whereas like when I was younger, before I had kids, or even when my kids were younger, my entire Saturday would be spent watching college football. A lot of times we're flying too, or doing something in another city, and so you don't feel like I have as strong of an opinion as I've had in the past with these guys. I didn't come up with a draft crush this year. I didn't really have one. Even in the playoff, I didn't necessarily find even watching the playoff games, I didn't necessarily find somebody that I was like all in on. That's generally been a thing on the podcast too. Do you have a draft crush? Do you have a specific draft crush this year?
Yeah, I have like specific to the Colts. I mean, I every single mock draft I've done, and if this comes up, I'll try to repeat it. Is I always have the same running back in my 4th or 5th round. So that's Damian Martinez out of Miami. I'd come across him watched Miami at some point last fall, and then I actually had a little in the weeds, but I ended up drafting him in like a dynasty fantasy football league. But like looking into him at that time, I was like, this guy sounds exactly like what Zach Moss was for this team in 2023. And so he always seems to slip in some of these simulators. And so then that just seems like the perfect time for them to draft. But so that's a little bit off the beaten path. I mean, I was very big on the Jahad Campbell hive, but now the shoulder issues are enough that I don't love it for the Colts specifically with what they've dealt with there. So the other one is Carson Schwessinger out of UCLA, but I feel like a lot of people are in that same boat with him. So that's not exactly a sneaky one. So I guess in terms of like one that I would kind of corner to myself that's not just totally mainstream would be Damian Martinez.
Yeah, mine historically have been guys who are going to go much higher than the Colts could take them. I don't necessarily know that there's anybody in that category this year.
Travis Hunter's pretty good. I think
Travis Hunter is great. That one feels like cheating. That feels like cheating.
Yeah, I think he's pretty unanimously considered the best player in the draft. I think
some of the guys that like I really loved in the playoff and stuff like that. I have I have questions about their NFL prospects, and I think that affects it. Like I really like Cam Skattebo from Arizona. I wonder about his speed at the next level. You know, like does he fit for the Colts in the same way? I just like that. You know, he did everything for Arizona State. That was the biggest thing. It's less of a projectable crush than I've had in the past. Set this up. The Colts. I want to start here. We're going to get to the mock draft here in a little bit. We're going to talk through some of the stuff for the draft. I'm going to start out with one thing that I know a lot of people were upset about, at least on my social media accounts. And I'm going to tell you why I don't care. You can decide I'm an idiot or not. Doesn't really matter to me. So Shane Steichen said, obviously, we're looking to get a pass-catching tight end, possibly, I think is the quote, yesterday. And I saw a lot of people be like, way to give away the ghost, Shane. Here's why I don't think it's a big deal. Every drafter for the entire offseason has been mocking tight ends to the Colts. It's the most obvious thing in the world. And if Chris Ballard or Shane Steichen said we don't want a tight end, no one would believe them. I just like everyone knows the Colts are in the market for a tight end. I just don't think it's that big of a deal.
Or if they actually believe that, if they don't think they need a tight end, they're screwed.
So yeah, that'd be terrifying.
Yeah. So it's almost like they're just like there's an urgency to that position. It was like 2 years ago when they said, yeah, we need a quarterback. And it was like, oh, they're telegraphing where they're going to go with the number 4 pick. Like, yeah, they kind of are. Not that this is the same thing because they don't absolutely have to draft it at number 14, but they're going to make a legit investment at tight end because they have to. They're just like you have a young quarterback, you have a run-based offense that has not been hitting a ceiling. You have struggled against zone coverage. You've struggled getting guys open in the middle of the field. Like it's the worst tight end room maybe we've ever seen. Seriously, I think it's that bad. Last year it was like last or dead to last in every single statistical category you can find across the NFL.
Receiving category.
I don't even think they were that great as blockers. I'll give Mo Alley Cox credit for that, but I didn't feel like for as low a production as they had that they hit some unbelievable level as blockers, because the problem is that even if they're pretty good at blockers, they're so obviously only that it changes the way the defense plays them. And so that has been the problem is even the guys they have, if you could talk yourself into a certain skill set, which I know Chris Ballard has said that like, oh, we like, this very specific things they do. That stuff only works if they're playing like in tandem with a two-way tight end. But when you have Kylan Granson out there with Josh Downs, are they running the ball? When you have Mo Alley Cox and Drew Ogletree on the field together, like, is that a lot of targets in the middle of the field? Like they keep getting in these binds because they don't have anything that remotely resembles a two-way tight end. The last one they drafted, the last one they went after that kind of had that potential even since I've been here. The only one really is Jelani Woods. And of course he doesn't ever get on the field. So they don't play anybody who has that a defense looks at and goes, well, gee, they really could be running or throwing here. And that's kind of the big thing they keep emphasizing. And also I think it shows you that like this is a pretty good year to need a tight end. Between the draft options in the first round, I think there's a guy in the second round we might get to that is a great fit for them. There's guys lower down the board that I don't think fit as your number 1 tight end, but are pretty good. And then there's 2 guys on the trade market, Dallas Goedert from the Eagles, Michael Mayer from the Raiders. It's set up to where like if they don't get a tight end 1, then they failed this draft. That is the number 1 way to fail. And so what they're kind of just acknowledging is our plan is to not fail, which I think it's a pretty good plan.
It seemed like other teams do mocks. Ballard says their pro scouts do a good job of, like he was saying the other day that their pro scouts do a good job of knowing what other teams need. You don't have to be a pro scout. to know what the Colts need. It's very obvious. It's just super obvious. I don't think it's that big a deal. I think that's obviously a big need.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about that comment from Shane real quick is that, like, Shane will certainly have input on the draft, but I wouldn't take the things Shane says pre-draft as like giving away some specific master plan, because we've been down this road before. 2 years ago when they were drafting the quarterback, I know the big buzzword coming out of the combines when he said he's looking for the most obsessive quarterback, the guy just absolutely obsessed with football. That's not the one they drafted. Clearly is what the way it's playing out. If that's what they were about, it would have been CJ Stroud or Will Levis, who I think came out of the womb ready to throw a football, and that's all they want to be.
That's two very different outcomes.
Very different. Well, being obsessed with football is different than playing it. I'm the times in my life I'm obsessed with football. I don't think I was going to make a good first round pick, but that's the thing, is they did all the reasons they drafted Anthony Richardson were not because he was the most obsessed with football. And that's actually been the journey they've been on since. So just a window into how, like, yeah, Shane Steichen may want certain specific things. That doesn't necessarily mean, oh, that's where they're absolutely going in the first round, because that's not the way it's played out.
The way Shane has talked about the tight end has changed some over the course of the last couple months too. Like at the combine, I felt like he was describing a tight end who was going to stretch the field, and you could throw him stuff in the 15 to 20 yard range and really stretch secondaries. At the owners' meetings, he was talking about a 3-down tight end who you could have on the field all the time, a complete guy. And those two things are kind of like, they don't have to be necessarily exclusive, but they kind of are. Like, if you have both of those things, if you have a guy who can play all 3 downs and block really well, and also is fast enough to stretch the seam, you have like Rob Gronkowski. I don't know if you should expect Rob Gronkowski. I mean, the Colts would love to have a Rob Gronkowski. I don't know if you should expect to get one of the greatest tight ends of all time in an era when most of the best tight ends are kind of a lot of the guys who are going to go in the Hall of Fame are kind of one-dimensional. Like Travis Kelce's not really a 3-down tight end in the same way you think of like Gronkowski. You know what I mean? Like, he does some blocking stuff, but he's not a people mover. You know?
Yeah. Well, in the same way, like George Kittle is an unbelievable blocker and catcher, yak guy, but he's not the seam stretcher. You're not sending him to push the safety back. In fact, the best guy right now, I think, that combines all of that, just from an athletic level, is probably David Njoku, the Browns, who was a first-round pick. But, I mean, it's not Gronkowski. It's just there's not many of those, guy that may come up later. Dallas Goedert is one of the best two-way tight ends. Unbelievable blocker and very good receiver, but he's not stretching the seams.
A lot of the guys who are good at blocking now are guys who are more of the possession receiver type of tight end, the Jason Witten style guy. Then the sort of do everything guy. Like I said, that's kind of a Hall of Famer that you're describing. If it's somebody who can be a devastating inline blocker, move all over the formation and still be a good blocker, and also stretch the field in a way where you can get consistent chunk plays out of him. Since we talked a lot about the tight end position, what's your sleeper pick position wise in the first round? Mine's defensive line. If they don't go tight end, mine is defensive line. I think that could be tackle. I think that could be end. That could be the result of a trade down or whatever. I just can't get it out of my head that they lost 1,500 snaps from last season. Now, 700 of those snaps were not great at the defensive tackle position. But just because they weren't great doesn't mean you don't want them to be better than that. Raekwon Davis was supposed to be essentially a third starter who failed at his job, Mm-hmm. So I've just been thinking, if they don't go tight end, if there's a world where Warren and Colston Loveland from Michigan, or Penn State's Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland from Michigan are both gone and they trade down or something, replacing Dayo Odeyingbo in one way or the other, either by drafting a tweener who can play end and tackle the way he did, or by drafting a young developmental pass rusher who can immediately give you snaps in place of Grover Stewart on passing downs from the tackle position. Something like that is my sleeper pick for what this team needs that maybe people aren't talking about, what people might get mad at. I think that's the spot that strikes me as like I could see them making a pick there.
Yeah, I think defensive end's probably the best choice for this because it's just one where like we know they need it. They don't necessarily need a starter, but there are base down snaps available if they find the right guy. Ballard loves it. If I had to move out of that area, if I had to pick a different one, I'm going to go with guard. So it's sleeper because not only is it not usually the best first round option, it's not very often where Ballard's going to go. Like he loves the middle rounds, later value, but he has gone there once before with Quentin Nelson at number 6 overall. So it has to be a guy that is just like, this guy is not a pretty good guard, doesn't need development. He is like a star from day one type guard, which you could argue some part of them needs. I mean, this year has to work for Anthony Richardson. They need to get their running game to a higher gear, and we've seen them have a very different offense the past few years when they've had a good right guard versus when they have not had a good right guard. It's amazing that a position like that has affected them as much as it has, but it really has. And so to replace Will Fries, there could be an option. I think it would only make decent sense to me if it's a trade down, maybe even after a second trade down. But a guy like Tyler Booker out of Alabama is interesting for them. I don't think it's normally what they go for because he's not a high relative athletic score guy. He is built to play in a phone booth as a mauler, so it would take them wanting to move to more of a power-based system. But I kind of think they should. And if they could create a world where they have 2 dominant pulling guards and build out a run game with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor that way, that would be the more sneaky move. Is they would have to see one guard as just, this dude is a freaking other level, and we traded down and we got value for it. So I don't think it's likely, but I put out a mock draft today where there's a route to trading back if they don't have the tight end situation they want in the first round, and getting those extra picks is how you can trade for one of the veterans that are on the trade block. So that's where I think that could make sense. Get a rookie guard in there that's like really good, but he's a rookie, and supplement that with the veteran tight end so you don't have just a super, super young offense.
A mauler at right guard would be essentially replacing Will Fries. I talked to Kevin O'Connell at the owners' meetings about Fries, and he was just saying, like, when you watch Fries tape, he's a guy that opposing teams probably don't like to play because of the way he blocks, and he's going to pancake you and he's going to run you over. I think the point you made though about we've seen what it looks like when right guard looks bad is important, because I think a lot of people are like, who cares? It's guard. You can just throw anybody there. You can't. We've seen the Colts try. It doesn't work.
Also, they have a new starting center, so it isn't quite as easy plug and play as maybe 2 to 3 years ago with the Pro Bowl version of Ryan Kelly. Now based on the story you wrote on Braden Smith, I'd be encouraged that he can bounce back to the player he was before, but he misses time too. So it's just not as simple as like drop this guard in and all he has to be is a decently talented player. That was the idea last year that, they went from Dalton Tucker to an older Mark Lewinsky, and they just couldn't get it to nearly the level it was early in the season with Will Fries. And you look at that Will Fries offensive line for 2023, very different unit than what we saw like late last season.
Yeah, it's interesting that, the way we talk about guard is sort of that it's this worthless position, but if you take a good one out and put a replacement level player or a below replacement level player in, you really notice.
Oh yeah.
You really notice. And I think
if you have a rookie guard, they're going to have a rookie guard, I'm sure. But if you have one that's like 4th or 5th round and Braden Smith misses games like he does, all of a sudden you have a world where your line from center over is Tanner Bortolini, rookie, Matt Gonzalez, and that is really inexperienced. And so you want it to be like a certain guy at right guard who's not someone that has to be propped up because he's a 4th-round pick, I think.
I also kind of think that the idea of plugging Matt Gonzalez in is kind of where everyone's head went initially when Fries signed with Minnesota. My sense from the owners' meetings is that the Colts aren't as sure about that as maybe the way we've talked about it, just as a Colts, observer collective or whatever. He's really a tackle. Matt Gonzalez is really a tackle. He can play guard. I don't know if you want him to play guard if you don't have to. So,
and they also means that if they move him to guard, they need a swing tackle, and they have valued that. They drafted Blake Freeland in the 4th round. That has not worked. So then they went for Gonzalez in the 3rd round. They have not treated. So all of a sudden you could do that, but that's not changing the investment level that much with how they value the swing tackle spot.
Well, and I mean, to your point about missing games, like Braden Smith has had injury issues in the past. Bernard Ryman typically plays almost every game, but he doesn't play every game. Mm-hmm. He missed 2 in 2023. He missed 3 last year in 2024 with concussion. That to me is still a fairly durable player, but you have to have someone who's capable of going in there. And based on what we saw last year with Blake Freeland, I don't think anyone should be counting on him in that way going forward. So, yeah, it's a definite need. Linebacker, it feels like with Jahad Campbell's shoulder injury that the 14th pick is probably not a place for that.
Yep.
I don't know about you. I don't like the idea. Like, I know Ian Rappaport put out a tweet the other day saying doctors told Campbell he'll be ready for training camp. But the previous report was that a lot of teams thought he would start on PUP. And injuries have a way of not matching the reported timeline.
Yeah. Well, and this team has been burned by early picks who came in with injury questions in recent years. In fact, I think it's probably been the biggest weakness in Crest Ballard's drafting is you had Jelani Woods. They drafted in the 3rd round after he played basically a full season on a high ankle sprain in college. Injuries have been a constant for him as he's growing into this athletic but physically undeveloped body. That's kind of been the theme, the thread line there, because then you had Anthony Richardson. There was quite a pronounced injury concern with him, but small samples to go on, but it was there in his profile. And then Juju Brents had an active injury situation coming into the league, coming off of undergoing wrist surgery, and he had a little bit more in his background too. So it's not that you just take those guys off the board. It's just you need to assess the risk and where you get them. So Jahad Campbell feels like a guy that, there's some really good team out there that can afford to wait on him more. That maybe isn't like, oh, he has to step in and be our cover linebacker week 1. That seems like a good fit. Or there's a world where you trade back and get him, and because you create extra picks, you can nail all these other needs. There could be a world based on how he slides, but yeah, just to draft an off-ball linebacker at 14 who may not start the season, in a year where like this team has to win and get it together now, I'm just struggling to see that fit right now.
Yeah, I think Campbell, if you think he's going to start the season on PUP, then Campbell is sort of that sneaky pick for a team who has a good linebacker headed into the final year of a contract that the team is not going to extend. Yeah. Right? Like that's the ideal situation for Campbell.
Yeah. That's like one of those Eagles draft a year early type moves.
Yes. I was going to say the Eagles. I'm glad you went there. I was going to say it feels like an Eagle thing. To see it coming and then draft the player. I don't think it's anything else. I think one more thing before we get into this mock draft that we're about to do. If you're watching on video right now and you're really waiting for this mock draft, you've been upset for a while now. And I'm sorry, but you're gonna have to wait longer. This is what's called a tease. We're teasing it for a long time. Anything stick out to you about what they've said about the quarterback position this week? There's one thing that stuck out to me, but I want to see where you're at first.
I guess the biggest thing that stuck out to me, was just that Shane Steichen talking about how the most consistent guy will win, and Shane can be, as everyone probably knows, a little bit tough to like crack to get to a deeper level on some of this stuff. So it's like consistency is kind of a vague thing. Like what? So I was trying to follow up and figure out what he means by that, and is it just as simple as like, well, if some guy can play a little bit more like Gardner Minshew and consistently not turn the ball over, hit some plays that get first downs, but there's just low upside. Is that really going to outweigh somebody who can make superhuman plays that are naturally not going to be that consistent? And I thought his answer to that was a little more revealing, where he just said, like, it's not enough to have the occasional splash play. It's about consistently moving down the field and scoring. And so that consistently moving down the field and scoring can come in a few different ways. It could be a one play, moonshot to Alec Pierce like we saw against the Texans from Anthony Richardson, or it could be variations of chunk plays. Again, with Anthony specifically, we have seen just flashes of it, but moments like the way he started that game against the Steelers was not the one play drive, but it was like a consistent move in chunk play, that the Jets game winner drive. Like, it's stuff, if he puts more of that together, where it's not just one drive in a game, but it's like, hey, this is a pretty regular thing in training camp, then that can win the job. Of course, it's all a little bit semantics, because you had followed up and asked about, like, does this mean, have you changed like where you're at on explosive plays? And he said, no, we still really want them. I think the answer is yes, a little bit, because like he used to be so about explosive plays that it kind of turned their offense all or nothing. But what he's looking for is a more consistent version of the explosive plays, like where maybe it's one a quarter. We dial back explosive plays. That's not just all 50-yard bombs. That's what they say. 10
It's
plus
a 10-yard. It's a 10-yard run and a 20-yard pass.
20-yard pass. So it's like
the NFL defines it.
Yeah. So if you get a couple of those, a quarter from the quarterback position, I think he's looking for like consistent body of work, even if within that body of work, Anthony Richardson's not going to be a 65% passer, but there is a more consistent version of what he can be if he could get up to, 55%, say, but, consistently avoiding turnovers and consistently within hitting 8% more passes and staying on the field more, consistently getting to more of those 10 plus runs, 20 plus yard passes. So I thought he fleshed out the vision a little bit better, and it showed a little bit of an evolution from a year ago, which was so much excitement for like, hey, let's just dial this up and get the defense and hit these big plays. When I think they learned, and this seeps into the tight end conversation, they learned that like they were too obviously hunting for certain outcomes all the time last year. And this is an evolution for all of them, Anthony and Shane, to both get more consistent in the way that they build out the offense, where it's not just hunting for that deep bomb to Alec Pierce, and that's all they do.
Yeah, one of the other, because the thing about him, his answer on that was that I think the whole media room kind of asked some follow up on this in one way or the other on the offense. And one of the other things I thought was revealing was, I said, when you went back and looked at last season, was it the long stretches of 3 and outs that kind of led you to that thing? And he said yes. Like he started to kind of try to like talk around it, and he was like, just yes. He didn't really explain it much. He was just, but if you think about some of those games, like the Houston game, the second Houston game, where it was tied headed into before the pick, but they were 2 of 15 and they had a ton of like 3 and out type drives. There were a lot of other games like that. They're early in the season. You remember the time of possession numbers were so out of whack. Because the other thing he said about it was we didn't really play complementary football at all last year. My first thought was, yeah, the offense left the defense on the field a ton. Now, a lot of that was the defense's fault for being terrible at run defense early in the season. But also, like, the offense was just handing the ball right back to them. That I think really probably grabbed their attention as well too. In terms of that stuff, the thing that stuck out to me was Richardson himself. I was pretty impressed with the way he evaluated himself. You know, admitting that he needs to be calmer in the pocket. And I think one of the things about him saying that is that he doesn't show it in the same way that other young quarterbacks show it. Like, he is not a happy feet guy. He is not a run himself into sacks guy. In fact, probably the best thing he does as a passer is not get sacked, and navigate the pocket kind of naturally. But that doesn't mean that he's not feeling that. So Chris Ballard at the owners' meetings was saying he can see it with Anthony where he's going through his progression and he's normal, and then all of a sudden it gets to the throw point, and it just kind of all erupts out of him in a burst. Mm-hmm. And Richardson acknowledged that, acknowledged that was a problem. And the other thing he said was, like, I asked, how do you get better at that? And he said a lot of it is knowing the offense, knowing where to go, being able to read things. You asked him, did he have an issue with some of the stuff they said about his preparation? He said, no, if it's a valid criticism, I don't. It was a very sober, like, evaluation of himself. And I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means he's going to fix it. It did tell me, though, that he does know, like, what the problems are with his game that need to get fixed, and he's not lying to himself about it, which I do think is a sign of maturity.
Yeah, I like the balance between maturity, but also the authenticity of it. It didn't feel like he was just saying the things that he thinks that somebody should say in that seat right now. Like, it felt like lessons that he.
Yeah, Anthony doesn't really do that. That's one of the things we love about him.
Exactly.
There's probably sometimes he should, and he doesn't do that.
Yeah. So when he's saying it, I do think he meant it, and it came through enough. It was sort of like he was able to say, able to acknowledge and be real about stuff, talk about criticisms and the value of them, but also in a still fairly positive way. Like, he's still looking at this as a big opportunity, which ultimately it is, because it's very easy for us who write about this kid and this team all the time to dwell on a lot of the negative momentum that's gone on with him and them about, what if he can't stay on the field, or what if, he can't make the accuracy jumps, or what if Daniel Jones beats him out, and all this, like, what if it doesn't work out type of dialogue in fairly so, because there's a lot of expectations, a lot running on this year. But at the end of the day, I think he's able to step back and say, well, yes, there's negatives that have happened, and there's an urgency that needs to come with this. This is still a big opportunity to be all the things he wanted to be in the first place. And that, I think, tapping into a version of that joy, that energy he had that has always kind of powered him out of adverse circumstances, dating back to growing up in Section 8 housing, is important. So he's got to find his way to do it. He can't just sit up there and suddenly become like, I'm Baker Mayfield up here feeling every slight of the world, when that's not who he is or how he should do it, or just pretending to be, like we just said, the cookie cutter, quarterback that just says the things that people should say. Like, he's got to find his way to learn these lessons and feel them and grow through them. And I felt a refreshing approach from him that, like you said, we'll find out what it means, but it's certainly better than there were times that he's talked last year that did not come off very aware of himself and what's going on, or was just a little bit hurt by situations and didn't know how to talk through and work through them. This felt like a more intentional but forward-looking approach to a year that has to come together right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things to always caution, just because I know the way people tend to talk about stuff, is if you say stuff like this, they're like, and then he doesn't play well, it's like, well, did all that stuff matter? Just because a player is thinking the right way or saying the right things doesn't mean that they're going to be a successful NFL quarterback. I have dozens of examples of this. The easiest one is Sam Ehlinger. Like, Sam Ehlinger did everything right probably every day he was in Indianapolis. I don't think he ever did. Like, I don't think you could ever question Sam's preparation, his mindset, the way he handled the team. it doesn't make it that just because all that stuff is true doesn't make him a you know franchise level starting quarterback in the NFL. Like,
Yeah.
it just like that's what backup quarterbacks are. Backup quarterbacks are guys who do everything the right way, but their level of play isn't starting level. That's what a backup quarterback is.
Yeah. Well, and like with Anthony, the same is true as when he was drafted. Is that the most likely outcome for a boomer bust player is the bust. And so
Right.
it's not like we're sitting here looking at this and be like, oh, he's on the right path. It's all going to be fixed. It's still, there's so many different things. And durability is one of those that the attitude may have nothing to do with whether or not he can stay on the field. But you much rather take the right thing said and the right attitude than the opposite. If you remember the last press conference he had before the benching is when he said, I'm a great passer after a 10 of 32 performance. That's very different than when he sat up there and talked about how the mental side of his game and the footwork technique, and they found these specific issues. But if he had come out there yesterday and said, I'm a great passer, so there was nothing to fix, my confidence in him making a huge jump on the accuracy would not be as high. So he's giving himself a better chance to make the improvements that are still unlikely because we're asking someone to improve pretty much more than even Josh Allen ever did. So it's not the likely thing, but there's upside in the fact that we know the talent's there. And now, at least right now, it feels like there's a reality setting in, a maturity setting in that had to arrive eventually, but hadn't yet until with Anthony Richardson until possibly right now, which is all you can hope for at this point.
Okay, here we go. We are going to do the first ever IndyStar Colts Cover-2 mock draft or podcast mock draft. We've done the version of this for the newspaper for a long time, but we're going to do it where this is the first time we're combining them. So the reason we do it this way, the reason we have a simulator do it, is that one of the things that I've always hated about mock drafts is that it's one person trying to know what all 32 teams are thinking and need. And even the national guys are not good at this. I think if you've read mock drafts as a Colts fan for years, you'll know that there's a lot of picks sometimes you're like, why would they need that? They've got this player, or why would they need that? They're doing this. The same thing is true of us. Nate and I spend 85% of our time thinking about the Colts and 15% of our time thinking about the rest of the league. I can't tell you for certain what the Rams want to do or what the Giants want to do, or, even like what the Saints want to do. I used to cover them. I don't know for sure. I have friends there who can tell me better than I can, but like, I don't know for sure what they're going to do. So in terms of us predicting every pick, the way a traditional mock is done, we've never done it that way. We tend to, the way we prefer to do it is we let a draft simulator play the rest of the NFL and we just react to the board. So Nate and I are going to let the board play out. We're going to debate whether or not we're playing like the scouting department and Chris Ballard, and the roles will go back and forth as we go here. But just kind of debate through the options at each pick based on what the board hands to us. We're not going to do something where we're trying to guess what Cincinnati wants to do with their draft pick. So with all that said, we're using the Pro Football Sports Network mock draft simulator. It is on the screen if you're watching on video, so you can see who people are coming off as they go. We'll see how this goes. We've never done it before. Here we go. Nate, you're up.
Here we go.
Nothing surprising in the first couple of picks.
Yeah, we're going to have to narrate a little bit just for the people listening, but
right now, as we get to pick 11, Tyler Warren is still there, and here we are.
Oh, well, if Tyler Warren's on the board, I don't think we're going to.
There's not going to be much debate. I think we can do a little bit.
There's trade offers. The Browns trying to give up next year's first, but it's no fun.
The Browns want to give up next year's first, but we'd have to drop all the way to 33. The Rams want to move down to 26, want us to move to 26, and they'll give us a third rounder and next year's second rounder for the 14th. And then the Giants want to give us a 34th. If it's me, my thought is I can't do that and get either of the top two tight ends. All of those fall too far.
Yeah, these are all about collecting future picks, which number one, I don't think is really the mentality of where the Colts are for the most part right now. Certainly not high in the draft, but also what fun is that to do in a simulator? Like we don't get to make the future picks, so we're not going to do that. So I think this is
Shedeur Sanders is available. This is where I am with Shedeur Sanders and the Colts, and I could be completely wrong. I don't have any inside information on this. My thing with Shedeur Sanders is my understanding of what draft analysts think of him is that he is a game manager type. Like he can run your offense. He's kind of a point guard, a distributor. He doesn't do anything dynamic. There's nothing that's good he's going to do. He's not the kind of guy who's going to make a bunch of plays outside of it. And just, the Colts in general under Chris Ballard, their drafting philosophy has not been to take that kind of player. So that's where I'm at with Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, and just the idea of a 3-person quarterback competition like that. That's why I asked what I did to Chris Ballard the other day, and he said, "Sure, you can write that if you want like to." Almost an acknowledgement of like that is not a very likely scenario to play out.
My belief is that if you don't have a quarterback and you think one is there, this is kind of what Ballard has said. If you don't have a quarterback and you think one is there, you should take them, regardless of whether or not it's a 3-quarterback battle or whatever you have to do. I just don't think that quarterback's in this draft.
No, because if he was, the Browns and Giants probably don't pass on him.
Exactly. That leaves
and where I feel on Shedeur, I think similar to what you said. I just don't know that he has dynamic traits that can work in certain situations, but it's pointless to chase in the AFC unless you already have maybe like if he falls to the Steelers and they just don't have alternatives whatsoever. They don't have a quarterback of any kind, let alone two that are battling. And they have a pretty good team around it that's already been to the playoffs many years in a row. So the only thing with the way this board fell is that's why I wanted to look at those trade offers is if it wasn't a far drop back, you could talk yourself into the fact that Loveland and Warren are on the board. So is there a way to take one?
We'll do this real quick. Both of us, I think, feel the same way on this. Again, this is the caveat here. I am playing the role of a scout here, but I do not have the in-depth opinions on stuff. Warren versus Loveland as prospects. We got to do a little bit of that. I'll let you go.
Yeah, well, I did write on both of these guys. I did 2 scouting reports this spring, and it was on these 2 guys. So if there's any players I have opinions on, it's these 2. There's a reason why they're both projected first round, both really good in different ways. Loveland, Colson Loveland out of Michigan is closer to what Brock Bowers was last year as the just athletic seam stretcher tight end who could catch he can just get open and he can catch the ball. And that fits a lot of teams that don't have that guy in the middle of the field, but have like a very set offense around it. That's not as much of what I think the Colts are laying out where they talk about the 3-down tight end. That's Tyler Warren to me. You look at Tyler Warren, I could see where, like, if you just want to compare highlights, Warren neither one's going to knock your socks off, mostly because Loveland didn't have a quarterback to create highlights with. And Warren, he just has so many like good plays that aren't spectacular. He's not a seam stretcher. He's not a separator like Loveland is, but he is this guy that will consistently make plays in the middle of the field. Get open against zone coverage. He's can make a lot of good contested catches when he doesn't separate, but he's so good as a blocker and versatile the many different ways you can line him up at inline, in the slot. He's lined up out wide and been pretty good running in breaking routes. He lines up as a wildcat quarterback, fullback, H-back, kind of everything. He is kind of fit for an offense that wants to get more creative and multiple, which is, I think, a lot of what the Colts are looking for in this spot. So I think fit-wise, Tyler Warren's definitely a better option for the Colts.
Twice now, Chris Ballard in the last month has brought up Jack Doyle as a game-changing tight end. People who only see tight ends as receivers will disagree with that. I don't care. I was told by Doyle's former head coach, Frank Reich, that I don't think it would bother Frank that I said this, but he said that Jack was A++ as a blocker because he could move him anywhere, all over the formation, anywhere you wanted to go. You could do whatever you wanted to do, and he could block it really, really well. And the thing that stuck out to me about watching Warren at Penn State is he does line up all over the he's lined up in a variety of different ways. He played wildcat quarterback, he's played H-back, he's played in the slot, he's played on the line. Now, I know there are some questions from some draft evaluators about how effective he is as a blocker in all of those different roles, but I can tell you this: Chris Ballard believes that no tight end is going to come in to the NFL as a Jack Doyle level blocker. He just doesn't college football doesn't produce those types of players anymore.
Yeah,
he said you look for people who can develop into that. And to me, Warren lining up all over the field, like he's already a little bit more versatile in the types of things he's been asked to do. The field stretching thing, a lot of the stuff that Penn State did with him that's down the field, his explosive plays are schemed up. If you really think back, or you go back and watch what the Colts have done with the tight ends over the first 2 years, like Steichen's pretty good at that, actually. Mm-hmm. They just don't have guys who can make it count. Like there's the Drew Ogletree pass. Oh, what game was that? It's on the end zone. And Richardson threw a laser right to him. He just biffed it.
That was the Lions game.
Kylan Granson last year was schemed up for a lot of stuff that just it didn't connect for whatever reason. Like Warren can do all that stuff. Steichen can do all that stuff. I'm with you on this for those reasons. To me, Warren sounds like the player that they're talking about than Loveland, who I know there's some analysts who think Loveland is a better blocker than he's given credit for, but he sounds a little bit more traditional or more defined in his role, where it sounds like the Colts are looking for something more versatile.
Yeah, I mean, Warren played inline some. And the thing to keep in mind with these two is they played in the Big Ten, it was the best conference in college football last year, and it's the most physical. So the best training you're going to get for a rookie, understanding that no rookie, like Ballard says, comes in as like some A+ blocker. So I think in his style, Loveland is better than he gets credit for, but his style is a lot of playing in the slot, like blocking from the slot. They have a guy, they want to do that in Josh Downs. They want to be able to live in 11 personnel and run the ball. And I just think it's a little harder with Loveland and Josh Downs on the field without bringing in a Mo Alley Cox. And then you do that and then you're taking Josh Downs off the field. I just think in terms of staying multiple, Tyler Warren's going to fit them just a little bit better. So I think he's the pick here.
So with the number 14 pick, the Colts select Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State. I think we just made most of Colts fandom happy. And just to our point about not waiting around and getting Loveland, he was gone 3 picks later to the Bengals.
What's fun about the simulators is they do some weird stuff too. It's not all just straight what everyone thinks is going to happen, because Shadur Sanders went to the Seahawks right after they signed Sam Darnold. So,
well, that's the thing though, and that's why you do the simulator, is because I think there's a lot of groupthink to me at this point in the draft with the analysts. They seem like they're different, but like it always ends up looking not the same as. Like the draft never ends up. I think what's the greatest like mock of all time? Like 10 picks, 12 picks, something like that in the first round. Like it's always a little bit different, and the further you get in the draft, the worse it gets. So
yeah,
the Colts are now at pick 45. The initial board that we're looking at is not great for us. We have no trade offers. Oh, wait, never mind. I think we
Yeah,
know who this pick is.
there is a good option here. So, and we have to hold Joel back because the first option listed is Luther Burden, and
Yes.
I also love Luther Burden because I also went to Mizzou.
We cannot properly evaluate Luther Burden. And I'm going to do this real quick just for the listeners. Nate and I both went to the University of Missouri. Luther Burden was a 5-star prospect who chose Missouri in the middle of the transfer portal era. And basically every year he was at Missouri, people said, when is Luther Burden going to transfer away? He never did. He was great for them. We cannot evaluate him properly. The Colts do not need a wide receiver. Definitely not in the second round.
No.
We will pass regretfully. But yes, he's on top of the board. And if this is the way I did my NCAA tournament basketball bracket, I would be picking him. But you guys would all hate me, so we're not doing that.
Yeah. And so the reason why we initially mentioned that it didn't look like it broke great is some of the names at the top are players who could fit this team in a different world, like Mason Taylor out of LSU. I've talked about he's a very fun two-way type of tight end. Well, we just took Tyler Warren. Xavier Watts, the safety out of Notre Dame, I think is very intriguing, but not after they just signed Cam Bynum. But you get just a little bit down there, and a player who's listed as the number 48 player overall in these rankings, we're at 45. That's the one I think is I already mentioned him, is like a lot of people are not on this one, but Carson Schwessinger, the linebacker out of UCLA, just makes sense that ideally if you drew a draft up, that you would have the Colts, you'd have them answering tight end and linebacker off the bat, because biggest need on both sides of the ball, positions that they just can't mess around on, given some of this, what they're looking for. They say they need a 3-down tight end. You got to take that, pretty early to know you're getting it in a rookie. And linebacker, we know they need one who can cover. Those guys just don't fall to the 4th round and beyond and make you feel great about it. My personal take on linebacker for this team is that they need to do this by day 2 because of the specific need for a cover linebacker. Because if you look at Chris Ballard's defenses across 9 seasons, it's a much different thing when he has a day 2 linebacker like Shaquille Leonard or Bobby Okereke at that cover spot than when it's EJ Speed, relying on a day 3, something to come together, and one of the hardest skills for rookies to come to the league with.
His day 3 successes have been more of the Mike style player. Anthony Walker, Zaire Franklin, speed to some degree, not to the same level as those two, but his day 3 successes at linebacker have been more of the traditional plugger in the middle of the field who works best when paired with a cover guy. So if the boards are right, if the draft analysts are right, because we've done enough of these now, both of us, all over different sites, that if you get past the 3rd round, it starts to feel like there's not great options from an athletic perspective. There's a couple of guys who are known as coverage guys, but they don't necessarily fit the way Ballard likes long, fast guys in this spot.
And I mean, Schlesinger, maybe he isn't quite the jump off the page athlete, obviously Shaquille Leonard, but maybe even Bobby Okereke, but he has enough of that. He just jumped out of the gym at the combine. The one drill he did was the vertical jump, and you see that when the way he covers is really high end. And then he also led all of college football, every linebacker in solo tackles, every player in solo tackles. And that's, to get both of those in one body for this team is important, because we know their tackling was horrible last year too. That's got to get better. I think to be able to answer both of those in the 2nd round is pretty tempting. In fact, the only
he hasn't run the 40, but his relative athletic score off of his pro day was 9.86.
Yeah. So it's usually a safe way to go.
Usually a Ballard tell.
And it's a good mix of, like, you have that athletic skill with, he just led the nation in solo tackles playing in the Big Ten. Like, for a linebacker to do that in the Big Ten, I mean, that's a pretty good mix. In fact, the only other guys I think you could talk yourself into even considering here, would maybe be one of these edge rushers like Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State. But again, they're going to draft edge rusher earlier than most people think. But when you're comparing the need, it's just not the same as the cover linebacker spot. And also, like the other one here, there's a couple guards that are in this range. But if we're waiting on one of those, cover linebacker versus guard, I'm definitely waiting on the guard.
Well, and we know from the combine this year that Chris Ballard said he likes the depth in the middle rounds in the offensive line. So that's part of it. I think defensive tackle is a spot that I'm interested in, but that's another position where as you get further down, Tyleik Williams from Ohio State is on the board right now. Darius Alexander from Toledo. That's another one that I know from doing these in the past is like there are some toolsy guys with some pass rush stuff a little bit later in the draft. And obviously with Buckner and Grover here, it's not as much of a pressing need. I think the pick with number 48 for the Colts is Carson Schwechner, linebacker, UCLA.
And Luther Burden
went the next pick to the Falcons.
So we were picking him. Our praise.
Not that we were picking him, but interesting.
Yeah. So this is going pretty predictable so far as what pretty ideal, I should say, as far as what you hope happens.
Well, and by what you hope happens, you mean that no one's mad at us, right? That's what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Everyone's gonna like this one.
No one's upset at us.
At least so far. All right.
Okay. The Colts, we are on the clock at number 80. We have one trade offer with the Chargers. It's for pick 86 and pick 214, which is a late sixth, early seventh. Not sure. Let's see what's on the board. Let's see what's on the board besides.
I mean, that's not an overwhelming offer to get a late 6th round pick.
So the top of the board right now is a guy that most of the time goes in the 2nd round here, and I like him in this spot. Darius Alexander from Toledo. I'm not a good scout. I don't know this. I didn't watch any Toledo last year. Apologize for that. I know Alexander is super athletic. And profiles as a pass rush type. I think the 3rd round here, if a 2nd round prospect drops that far, is kind of the place I would go with it. The NFL Network won't let me look at his draft profile without playing a video autoplay, so I'm sorry about that. That's my case there. Is just if you're looking for a defensive lineman. I don't know as much about Braden Swinson, who's also on the board. I'm gonna need your help on that. But Alexander profiles as the kind of developmental 3 technique that I think fits this is not on this roster right now. Neville Gallimore is kind of a 1-tech tweener type.
Yeah, what they really need when they go after their defensive tackle is their next one is a pass rusher. So they had that in Dio Dangbo was at his best rushing inside next to DeForest Buckner. They lost him, and then the guy that was next best at that on the roster, is Taven Bryan, who's also gone. So they really don't have anything in that mold. So while they do need a backup, good backup, nose in some version, they at least tried for some more of those traits in Neville Gilmore. So I think this one, if you're going to go after a defense tackle, especially if you're going to justify doing it in the 3rd round, I think one that gets after the passer is intriguing, and also one that you can go on traits a little bit more because it's not an immediate plug and play a ton of snaps type of guy. It's more of a guy that you don't have to. It's rotational. So NFL.com has him as a 2nd round prospect, and the last line of it, the write up from Lance Zierlein, it says his best football could be ahead of him, but right now he projects as an average rotational player or backup. That's kind of what they need for this year. Is if they get an average rotational player or backup at defensive tackle, that's better than what they had last year. But then there's that potential for him to develop into something more as you have, Grover Stewart, getting into his 30s. it's worthy to kind of balance those two. I think he's rated better like on these mock drafts and these scouting reports than Braden Swinson, who's the other defensive lineman kind of in this range as we're picking. He's out of LSU. NFL.com has him as a round 3 to 4 prospect, and we're in round 3 of this, so it's it's not like we can't look at some of those. But that's some of the more the guys that are on here. Him and like Jordan Birch out of Oregon. I think he's also more of like a neither of these guys. This is the right range for those guys, but neither one necessarily fell. Although Jordan Birch, the interesting thing I noticed about him is that NFL.com likes to come up with player comps. His player comp on here is Dayo Odeyingbo. So that is interesting and probably worth considering. Yeah, I mean, he came from Oregon, so again, it's another guy who's made the college football playoff, played in the Big Ten, so he's played in some of these kind of bigger moments. Let's see here. They basically think he's got physical traits and upside, but he's inconsistent on the field. Leaves too many plays on the field, but the upside will have teams anxious to light the fire and get more out of him. That's from NFL.com.
6'4", 279. That's more of the hybrid player. I think, depending on what you want, I think you could go either Alexander or Birch here.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate between those two. I don't see anybody else without diving into every guy here that
there's a line. Well, we already got a linebacker. My bad. What about Tyler Show's on the board? You want to get spicy?
Well, I don't think he's going to last this long in real life, but yeah, I don't. That's another project traits quarterback that I don't know. You can talk yourself into it. I don't think so, though. I think we've narrowed it down to the right way. I think this makes sense for Chris Ballard to go after this position in the 3rd round. He took care of your 2 big needs you have to get starters for. So now he can tap into his love of the trenches. Do you have a lean on this between Alexander and Birch?
Well, historically, Ballard tends to prefer guys who are kind of that tweener type. He tends to prefer that guy who's more of a tweener type over the straight tackle. So I'm wondering if maybe we should go for that type of player, somebody who can help out at both spots.
Yeah, I think it is a good way to go to for where they're at right now, where they lost Dio, who's doing both of those, but they also lost, some other snaps at defensive tackle. It makes sense when you think about the way they're going to play this year, where Kwity Paye's a base end in one spot, but they've got Laiatu Latu, and you could start a guy like Jordan Birch at defensive end on first down, and then slide him inside passing downs to have basically a foursome of Latu, Paye, Buckner, and Birch on clear passing downs. I think that makes some sense. Birch is at 279, so he's a bigger end who is built more on traits as a pass rusher. So he probably is like a guy who can, probably like Dio, defend the run a lot better on the outside than the inside, rush the passer a lot better on the inside than the outside.
You could make the case. That they have a more obvious hole at defensive tackle because they signed Neville Gallimore to replace 2 players essentially. But I would push back against that because Paye's in the last year of his deal. Mm-hmm. Tyquan Lewis is in the last year of his deal and is getting up there in years. Those are your 2 big ends right now. Your 2 bigger ends right now. If you take Birch, you kind of give yourself, a player at both end and interior rusher. I think I'm leaning Birch.
I am too. I also just think he's the type of guy that Charlie Partridge, their defensive line coach, is going to look for. Like it says a lot of what he needs to develop at is just some of the technique, some of the moves inside and his technique in his hands, which that's always been getting in the weeds, but that's a Charlie Partridge thing going back to when he worked with Aaron Donald. I think he would like a guy like that. And it gives you a chance to sort of like you can play him in this limited tweener role that fills a couple needs this year while having the chance to pull a little bit more out of him for 2026 when Kwity Paye's gone. There's not that same opportunity immediately coming for the defensive tackle until we get a couple years in line for Grover Stewart's age. So I think we are in agreement here.
We have the trade offer to move down 6 picks, but the guys we're discussing, at least on the board we're looking at, are 2 of the top 4 players available. So I don't know.
Yeah. And
I don't know if an extra 6th rounder makes me comfortable with losing both.
Exactly. Like, because we're into 2, it's not a bad idea, but I'd want to get more out of it than a 6th rounder. Like, I just don't, for what this team has to find some immediate guys who can play, and I just don't think the extra 6th is helping us out a lot. So should I put the call in
with the number 75 or no, with the number 80 pick? My bad, I'm looking at the wrong thing. The Colts select Jordan Birch, defensive end, Oregon. Now we're going to get into the stuff that's a little bit harder to figure out. We kind of started a run. We kind of started a run on defensive linemen here at the end of the 3rd round.
So you want to be that team that starts the run.
The big issue, the big thing that we don't have yet is a guard. That's the big thing we don't have yet so far. On the obvious needs, this is the 3rd and the 4th round. That is kind of the area where it felt like Ballard was talking about when he was doing this earlier, saying middle rounds. We got to our pick. We're at 117. We have a trade offer from the Chargers. They want 117 and 232 for pick 119 and pick 181. This is an automatic accept for me. If I was doing this as a simulator, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, none of the guys I see in this, at least the top couple, which is what matters when there's only, I mean, you're moving down 2 spots. None of them are jumping out to me like they're not those positions we mentioned even that they need right now. So I think we just go ahead and accept that. So it's basically moving back 2 spots, giving up the 7th rounder to get, what is that, the 5th rounder?
Well, to move, we go down 2 spots in the 4th to move up 50 spots with our last pick.
Yeah, I think that's worth doing. So we're going to go ahead and accept that. And 2 positions went that we wouldn't have drafted anyway, wide receiver and cornerback. So that's some easy money. So we're gonna have to. This is the hard thing about doing this in a live podcast is we're trying to learn a little bit more about some of these guys than.
Well, especially here in the later rounds, this stuff won't make it to print for sure. Bashal Tutin, a running back, is available on the board we're looking at. Who else is here? Because there's some tackles and edges. CJ West from Indiana is interesting. I know he tested well athletically. What do we got in the offensive line market?
Yeah.
Nate's favorite player is on the board.
He is. That guy I mentioned, Damian Martinez, in 4th round is often, that's when I think he's going to go. Sometimes he'll slide to the 5th in these, but I don't think it's going to happen based on the combine testing he put up at 217 pounds. I don't see any, just as we're looking around, I don't see guards rated very highly here. The next one's 148, and we're at pick 119. So that part of this has not gone ideal. You would like to answer that by the 4th round, but that's the way that this board has fallen. So I don't think we should force that. That's 30 picks over projection. Not only that, but there's a couple guys here that are in a similar range between 148 and 171, versus other players who are much, much more up there. This Deion Walker guy is interesting. He's this defensive tackle is the highest rated defensive tackle out of Kentucky. But I just think the fact that we just drafted a guy who can play inside and outside, it just makes it hard to pass up a running back and a guard to add another defensive lineman this early at least. So, and we did pick up, we added an extra pick, I think late 5th round with that last trade. So we could take a couple bites at some of this, but the guy that's
Walker is interesting. Walker is interesting because he's extremely long, but he's not like explosive like a player like Odengbo or at least he doesn't seem like, from what I'm looking up on him, he doesn't seem explosive. I would probably take a defensive tackle here. I'm not going to try to talk you out of Davian Martinez, but I would probably take Walker or CJ West in this spot.
Okay. Well, do you feel like is that duplicative of the last pick we made, or is it the fact that Birch can play inside outside makes that not a concern?
Well, just in terms of what they had on the roster last year, they had Odengbo, who Birch is who we drafted kind of to replace him for that. They signed Neville Gallimore to replace one of the defensive tackles. That leaves a defensive tackle open. So there still is a spot on this team for a defensive tackle. Specifically, I think a 3 technique. So if you like Walker's length, that's a possibility. I don't think he's anywhere near as explosive as the kid from Indiana, CJ West.
Well, interesting thing about him, and some of our listeners who are Hoosier fans will probably not like this, NFL.com projects him for the 6th round. It says he has likely day 3 value, or his day 3 value is a likely 3 technique backup, which is what we'd be drafting him for here, but they think this is 2 rounds too early for CJ West.
That's interesting. His sack production
does have athletic skills, but they just don't.
West sack production is not great.
Yeah, sack production.
It's mostly his athleticism.
His length. He's athletic, but he's 6'1", so it's not maybe the full rounded body. So this, between those two, I mean, Deon Walker feels a little bit more fit for this range, and also like it does. If he's like a backup 3 technique, I do think there's a world where like Birch's value in this setup on this team is to slide inside next to DeForest Buckner, but you still need a backup to play snaps behind DeForest Buckner.
The hard thing with Walker is that like basically the only thing that he does, the only physical trait that carries him is that he's super long, because his explosive numbers are awful.
Yeah.
I mean his vertical is 25. I might still be able to get 25. Yeah, that's the hard part with Walker for me, is that he's just not very athletic.
And the thing is, it feels like there's a good amount of, well, this is true for running back too, but there's a good amount of these defensive tackle backup 3 technique types coming up in this similar range before we get.
Well, if CJ West is mostly projection, I have no problem going David Martinez.
Yeah, we'll pick next at 151. It just seems like it's gonna be a good range to still go after the defensive tackle. Then, I mean, like I said, at running back you could argue that, but I think what's interesting about running back for them is they need a specific type to be the complement to Jonathan Taylor. And so
I still want 2.
Yeah,
I still want 2. I still want the every down back and the pass catcher. And if that means that something happens to Khalil Herbert, oh well.
And see, I think Dameon is the closest to being that's left, that what I'm seeing here is closest to being a 3-down type, because he's a big bruising running back who has elite numbers as far as running between the tackles, breaking tackles, yards after contact, some of the best in the class. He's rushed for 1,000 yards at 2 different schools. But he's transfers that big size to being a great pass protector, and I think that's what they really need. Last year they played Trey Sermon only because of pass protection, but he couldn't do anything else. I think Damian Martinez is a guy that's more like the Zach Moss mold, where he can pass protect and really help you where Jonathan Taylor can't, but he can leak out and catch some passes at least to like Zach Moss's level. And then what I like about him with this team is that, like, you wear a team down, you have a defense so on edge guarding for Jonathan Taylor that you give him a spell in like the early second half, bring in a bruising running back to run right at them, especially if you get them into small personnel, which we can now do stuff like, play around with that with Tyler Warren. That's where I think Damian Martinez is. I think he's just too good of a fit here in a role that I think is they shouldn't mess around too much on too. I think the number 2 running back to me is more important than the backup to DeForest Buckner for immediate needs.
With pick 119, the Colts select Damian Martinez, running back, Miami. Tootin, who on this board was ranked ahead of him. Again, we're just kind of we're basically using like NFL.com and other things as our scouting report. It said drops and fumbles, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, nah, I'm not even trying.
That's the thing is like some of these running backs for what the Colts specifically need, they don't have, they're not on the details in the ways they need to be to complement Jonathan Taylor.
We've taken tight end, linebacker, defensive end, and running back. We are clicking off needs very well right here. We're at pick 151. We already have an extra 6th rounder thanks to the Chargers. So what's the board look like overall now for pick 151? I see a guard. I have no idea. I don't know anything about him.
A couple guards here. Well, Garrett Dellinger is out of LSU. That is a player that I have mocked them before that I felt like I believe he was a tackle that could move inside to guard. Or at least he's played. He has some tackle background. Comes from a great offensive line at LSU. They're up for like the Joe Moore Award for the best line in college football. So that feels like a decent. If you're going to wait till now, which wasn't ideal at guard, but if we're going to wait to the 5th round, I kind of like that idea just because, they at this point, if they're not getting a high pick at guard, they probably are going to try to kind of plug one in and run this zone system where it's more about the collective than the individuals. And I think Garrett Dellinger, with his background coming from LSU's offensive line, but also having a little bit more to his athletic profile as a former tackle, that one is pretty intriguing.
I have an issue though. He's hurt a lot.
That's true.
And as you pointed out at the beginning of this, Colts don't need to be taking injury-prone players.
Yeah, it's tough because this is the 5th round, so at some point you have to let that go. But they need him as a starter, is the thing. So
I might go, and this does hurt me as a Missouri person. May Truman forgive me. I might lean toward Bryce Cabeldue from Kansas, who athletically is not the same. He does have the nasty profile that they've used before. Dellinger's injury history is concerning to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Cabeldue projected on NFL.com around 4 to 5, so it's good range to be in the 5th round looking at him. And he's kind of what I think they should go after in this draft, which is like there's a lot of guys in this draft who are trying to make it as a tackle, but they really should be a guard. And so there's going to be teams that are desperate at tackle that are like, well, let's try it. But I think you get more value for those guys moving them to the easier, more natural position when that's what you need, which is where the Colts are. So, yeah, he is a really cool athletic profile. I remember looking at this guy before. It says he projects as a backup guard, but that's maybe just out of the gates.
Well, we're in the 5th round anyway, so we're not getting anybody that the scouts are going to think is a starter right now. But no one likes hearing this, but everyone thought Will Fries was a backup too, and now he makes like $11 million a year with the Vikings.
Yeah, and he was drafted in the 7th, so this is the 5th. I think that's a pretty good one. I mean, there's some backup quarterbacks here that I like, but I don't think you can go for the 3rd quarterback over the starter.
Dylan Gabriel and Riley Leonard are the 2 that are on the board that we're looking at.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel struck me as that's a very fun backup type, but the need at guard right now is just too high. Because like we said, if we skip it, we just say, okay, well, we can move Matt Gonzalez inside. They don't have a swing tackle, and now they don't have the pick to get the type of swing tackle that they feel like they need with Braden Smith's, injury history. So I think that's one you threw out there. It's hard to find a better mix where like I said, the player of Dellinger is intriguing, but you brought up a good point. They can't whiff on
He's missed half the season twice. He missed half the season in 2022 and half the season in 2024. And just as soon as I saw that when I pulled up his profile, I was thinking back to what you said at the beginning about when the Colts have gotten in trouble in the past. It's been guys coming off. Like you brought up Woods played his senior year with a high ankle sprain. Dellinger's injury this year was he had tightrope surgery for a high ankle sprain. That's why he missed the end of the season.
Yep. No, it's a good separator. So I think we go with the other guard.
We are picking a player from Kansas.
That we are.
May Missouri have mercy on our souls.
I know. We passed Luther Burden and we took a player from Kansas.
Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame is interesting to me. He's actually a guy I kind of like. But we took Carson Sweshinger in the second round, so we don't need to force linebacker at this spot.
Yeah. I'm trying to think the needs left. We need to get the quarterback at some point.
A safety at some point I'm not opposed to.
So we've got 2 picks coming up here, 181 and 189.
We picked up 181 from the Chargers.
Yep.
So this is the pick we got from the Chargers. Dylan Gabriel is top of the board that we're looking at.
Well, there we are. That's pretty intriguing. He usually doesn't last to the 6th round in these. Dylan Gabriel.
So tell me about Dylan Gabriel. I mean, obviously, I like the quarterbacks we all kind of know a little bit more about because we're watching college football. But from an NFL perspective, tell me what you like about Gabriel.
Also, Gabriel, to me, like the player is just a lot of fun. You look at he led Oregon to they were the #1 team heading into the college football playoff, won the Big Ten, all of that. So he had the big seasons, the 3rd team All-American, Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year type of player, and finished 3rd in the Heisman Trophy. So he's done it at 2 schools, Oklahoma and Oregon. He's not projected as more than backup because he's 5'11". So he is that it's the opposite prototype than Anthony Richardson, but it is closer to Gardner Minshew's on the smaller side. They're not that short. So if the height is prohibitive to you, then that can be a thing. But he's really good at. He just seems to know how to play at the size he's at. It's just always kind of been in his background, and yet he's become a guy that big time college programs wanted to be their dude, and then he's a Heisman Trophy candidate across the board here, and he's one of those just a lot of experience too. He was playing back to 2022. He was started at Oklahoma, so that's basically three seasons of starting across 2 different teams. Just seems like a guy that is going to fit. Just super accurate. He's good mobility, more mobile than most of the options that you will find at this stage of the draft. Kyle McCord is the other one that is. I think you could talk yourself into either one of those. For Kyle McCord, they're kind of similar. Where McCord is good mobility. He came off a great year at Syracuse after it didn't work at Ohio State. But I don't know that I don't think he sees the field as well as Dylan Gabriel, I guess is the main thing. I find him a little less reliable. So maybe there's a little more to squeeze out of him developmentally because he's not as small. But I just think Dylan Gabriel already knows how to play as a pretty good backup. So it kind of depends how much you want to develop. But I still think there's a firm ceiling on both of them for different reasons. I just like Gabriel a little bit better.
I do too. I don't have any good reasons for it. Just I do too. With the 181st pick, the Colts select Dylan Gabriel, quarterback, Oregon.
So we are to our final.
Oh, and he is Peebles. I didn't realize he was there at defensive tackle.
Yeah. We could have maybe picked him and then come back on the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't see him there either because it didn't pop up right away. He is one I was really tempted by when I've done that. So we're here at our last pick.
Because we traded 232. That's right.
Yep. So we moved up. This is 189, last pick of the draft.
For the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, right. So we can still get our defensive tackle back up.
We did not get a lot of trade offers on our later round picks.
No.
Whereas normally, I think Chris Ballard ends up trading a 4th rounder for 2 6th rounders and making our day a lot longer.
Exactly. So a lot of what's here is going to be defensive tackle options seem to be pretty prevalent. That's the kind
And
of
there's some offense. We've got some offensive linemen. I'd have to look up. We're in the part of the draft that I don't know a ton about these guys.
well,
the top one on the board we're looking at is Elijah Roberts. Elijah Roberts is a defensive tackle from SMU, 6'4", 285. Kind of another one of those tweener types that Ballard tends to like. Tackle-wise, Jack Nelson from Wisconsin. This would be, if we're taking a tackle here, this person automatically becomes competition for Blake Freeland.
Yeah, which is totally acceptable. They've not wanted to play Blake kind of all last year, so I think it's fine to just kind of move on with something else in the draft if that's what they want to do. Elijah Roberts he's kind of interesting because he's a tweener and he was projected 5th round on NFL.com. So this is the 6th round, but I don't know if that's too duplicative because we've got Tyquan Lewis who moves inside outside. Now Jordan Birch moves inside outside.
Can we go down a little bit I want to see if there's another player. No. Wait, keep going. No, I didn't see who I thought I saw. There he is. Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M. Is a super long tackle. He's like 6'9" or 6'7", I mean. He's 6'7". Small school guy. This type in the draft is when Ballard kind of looks for those guys too. He's a tackle. Offensive tackle.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad idea. If they're like, we don't know how this all is going to play out, but it's set up right now where Braden Smith's playing in the final year of a deal. There's a world where Matt Gonzalez steps in as the starting right tackle the next year, and then you need that swing tackle. And it doesn't seem like they have faith in Blake Freeland to be that. So I think that can make some sense. I know this Cam Jackson out of Florida, defensive tackle, is one of those like traits guys who has not put it together, but he's a defensive tackle. His athletic score is not as good as I was going to guess, but he's projected round 5 by NFL.com, and it's the size that they're in love with. So he is 6'6", 328. As a dude. So he's a non-factor as a pass rusher, but he's a backup nose who, it just has freakish size. So I mean, you could, they paid Raekwon Davis a lot to be that last year, and he couldn't be that. So they did value the idea of it. So that's something to consider, a backup to Grover Stewart in a way that Jordan Birch, while he can move inside outside, isn't going to be that. We're talking about a 50-pound difference between those two players. So that one's kind of intriguing to me.
I could go Jackson or Vincent here. I looked up the Wisconsin tackle, and he's not super athletic.
Yeah, I don't know as much about Carson Vincent. I for some reason, Alabama and A&M didn't make it on my TV a lot last fall. So
he feels like a Chris Ballard 6th round pick. Small school, super long frame. On the flip side, they've taken guys like you're describing. Also, that super tall guy is basically what Raekwon Davis was.
Yep.
I'll leave it up to you. You can pick either one.
Well, I'm going to leave it up to you because I forced the pick of Damian Martinez and kind of pulled on Taylor Gabriel. The one thing I'd say, Vincent,
I should have. I'm just realizing now. Another one of my favorite players is Hunter Wohler, and he went at pick 185 to the Steelers. So I capitulated. I got too interested in Dylan Gabriel, and I would have picked Peebles over him, and I would have picked Wooler over him.
Yeah, we could have waited when we had a pick coming up so soon. So that was,
that was a mistake.
That was a bit of a mistake.
I'm going to take the Alabama A&M offensive tackle. I think offensive linemen, developmental offensive linemen generally have a better shot than developmental defensive linemen to turn into something later.
Yeah, and I mean, they can do a 1-for-1 swap with him and Blake Freeland, but not feel the pressure to play him as they develop him because they've got Matt Gonzalez. So
they've taken defensive linemen late a lot. They've taken guys in the 5th and 6th and 7th rounds a lot. None of those guys have really turned into like players for them. Whereas that's not true on the offensive line. They have developed some guys on the offensive line into guys. So I'm going to take the Alabama A&M guy and see what Tony Sperano Jr. can do with him.
All right, Carson Vincent it is.
That's our draft.
So it'll show us the full draft.
It's probably good. It's probably a good thing that my biggest regret is in the 6th round. But that's my biggest regret. I would have passed on Gabriel and probably taken Aeneas Peebles. I just didn't realize he was there.
Yeah, Peebles is intriguing me too. So that's the one thing. We did not end up getting a true classic defensive tackle backup, but I think it's okay because Jordan Birch can moonlight there at least.
Well, they've also signed guys in the past there. Stallworth was like not like great, but honestly more productive than Raekwon Davis last year for a couple of years for the Colts. They can probably fill that spot. Once you get into the 6th round, I don't know that you're getting anybody. I don't know that you're getting anybody that's Cam Jackson lasted till 250 in this one.
Sure did. He almost made it to the UDFA round where we could have tried. So
this is the Colts draft class. 1st rounder, tight end Tyler Warren. 2nd round, linebacker Carson Schlesinger. 3rd round, defensive end, defensive tackle Jordan Birch. In the 4th round, we took Damian Martinez, a running back out of Miami. 5th round, we take Bryce Cabaldu, guard from Kansas. With our first pick in the 6th round, we take Dylan Gabriel. We wish we would have taken Aeneas Peebles. We didn't because we were trying to move too fast. And then with our last pick at pick 189, I took Carson Vincent from Alabama A&M. We did a good job of clicking off needs here. Defensive tackle is really the only one that I think we didn't hit. Safety too, but obviously they already have 2 starters at safety, and they have Rodney Thomas, who you never know. Maybe the change of defensive coordinator, helps Rodney, and change in defensive back coaches helps Rodney Thomas in a way we don't know. So I don't really have a problem with that. I don't really have a problem with this draft, other than just liking Peebles.
Yeah, in the fact that like Jordan Birch can moonlight as a defensive end and defensive tackle. So I don't feel like we totally ignored the defensive tackle need, even if it didn't get it there completely. But really, when you hit those first 2 picks, when you don't have to trade up, but you get Warren and Schlesinger, big time 3-down player on both sides of the ball, their biggest position of need. I think that alone is going to set up a good draft if they're able to do it. I have doubts in real life about Tyler Warren making it to 14, but hey, if that happens, and it could, then I think it already sets it up well. And beyond that, I think we just nailed off the needs pretty well. I mean, there's part of it where I wish we had gotten a little bit better of a guard because he has to step in and be day one. But if we're going to wait on guard, one of those like tackles they move to guard, that's the kind of guy that's on my radar there. So I think it's pretty good. I think it's a lot of guys that would step in right away. Pretty much everyone till these last 2 picks in the 6th and 7th in the 6th round are guys who should play for this team. And so that's what you want.
In theory, philosophically, if you could get a linebacker, like if there was an Okereke in this draft, where you could get like a starting caliber linebacker in the 3rd, it probably allows you to get defensive, a more ready plug and play defensive or offensive lineman in the 2nd. But I've seen people talking about Schlesinger as a 1st rounder, so I don't have an issue with that, because if I got a 1st round linebacker in the 2nd round, that's the one gaping hole to me in the defense right now. And I really want to get to a point where even if Jalen Carlisle develops, I want to get to a point where you're taking Zaire Franklin off in obvious passing downs and leaving 2 coverage guys on the field if you have 2 linebackers.
And the thing is, if you put that off to the 3rd round, then you pretty much are forcing that pick there. I just don't think you should wait to the 4th round to get your cover linebacker, given the issues they had last year, where he also needs to be able to tackle. That's like the Schwessinger doing both of those, I think, is just valuable enough to be a 2nd round pick. So I like it.
There we go. That is our draft. We will probably, I think for print, it will probably just be 2 or 3 picks. Just based on space, but you can always listen to the podcast and see what it is. This is a long pod. We're going to sign off now. Hopefully you have time to listen to all this before we get into the draft tomorrow, and we will see. We'll see if Tyler Warren falls, or if the Colts decide to get a little weird with it. We'll find out what happens for the Colts Cover 2 podcast. This is Joel Erickson and Nate Atkins from the IndyStar draft rooms. Signing off.